Join us for a very special story about a group of friends that hung around each other for 9 days and recorded the results. It's time to meet the Traveling Wilburys. Stay with us. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, making us a part of your life. We promise we won't take up too much time, but we will make it entertaining, right, Eric?
That's right. Indeed, we will.
Or mildly entertaining.
No, let's
somewhat
beat this
entertaining.
Up a bit. Come on now.
Somewhat entertaining. Kind of entertaining.
Very entertaining.
If we get to marginally entertaining, let us know. We will up the production values. Marginally is the lowest we'll
Do you
go.
know something I don't? Maybe I don't know.
I don't.
Are you getting some reaction or what?
No. It's my overwhelming insecurities coming to light in a public forum for everybody to see. I'm laying it bare.
There it be.
You can join us on social media, 3324 Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Great group of folks over there that love music and movies. They are outposting us. Like I feel like I'm like the last horse in the race because it is taking off, and I'm happy for it. So why don't you join us over there? If you would, we would love to see you and love to interact with you in that fashion. It's such a lot of fun over there. Great
Absolutely.
stuff.
And again, we'd love to hear people talk and respond and give your comments to anything that we record, we talk about. You could tell us we're wrong. You could tell us we're full
like I said
of.
In the last episode, those will go to Eric.
Well, of course, yeah. I'll take responsibility. All right.
No, we appreciate you joining us on this musical journey that we take what we feel is the best and finest in music and movie podcasting. And we are talking about music in this episode. Eric and I were kind of, when we were talking about what to do next, and we kind of talk about our scheduling, which is very kind of loosey-goosey. Mm-hmm. I kind of threw out the Traveling Wilburys in the list, and I said to Eric, well,
it's time.
we've done Dylan, we did Nashville Skyline, we've done the Beatles, so there's George Harrison. We did Wildflowers, so there's Tom Petty. We did Electric Light Orchestra, New World Record episode, so there's Jeff Lynne. The only one we didn't do was Roy Orbison, so it was kind of like, all right, well, we've kind of circled the wagons around these guys. I think it's time to now, for season 2, to bring all of these characters together and talk about this amazing story. The story of this is almost outshines the music. Almost.
Yeah, outshines. I agree.
You think?
Yeah,
the circumstances.
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah.
The circumstances. So let's start with the stats, and we'll get this. We'll get the show rolling like we always do. This was released in October of 1988. It was produced by Otis and Nelson Wilbury. It won a Grammy for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group. Well deserved. Hit number 3 on the Billboard charts. And to match that, it went 3 times platinum. So that's in excess of 3 million copies sold. And I'm sure it's more than that. The lineup, who is in the Traveling Wilburys? Well, you've got Nelson Wilbury. You've got Otis Wilbury. You've got Charlie T. Jr. You've got Lefty Wilbury. And then you got Lucky Wilbury. That translates to, in the same order, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, and Mr. Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, yes.
And a side honorary Wilbury is Jim Keltner on the drums. He is known affectionately as Buster Sidebury because he's a sideman. Because he provided the rhythm section,
the percussion,
yes,
on the
and
album.
He's an expert.
Yep.
And a perfect fit for this.
Long time percussionist.
Yeah. Session drummer extraordinaire. I mean, he's one of those guys, and he's just a pocket drummer. He really just is good for this, for these 2 albums that they did, Volume 1 and Volume 3. It's just kind of like having that steady hand through both albums is kind of like, he's a member of the group,
That's right. Yeah. I always thought so. Why not?
Absolutely.
Nobody cares about the drummer. Right? In this case, nobody ever.
In this case, no one's going to be looking at the drummer because there's so many other band members to look at. Do you know where the term Wilbury came from?
I do, actually.
Yeah, what is it?
It's kind of a weird. This is almost a Monty Python type. I could totally see this as a skit on Python because you know how the English like to play with words and And so, you know, when Jeff Lynne was recording with George Harrison on his Cloud 9 record, and they were in, you know, sessions and they were playing with the, you know, with the mixing and the board and all that stuff. And, you know, so every now and again, there would be glitches. There would be something that they didn't like, or it didn't, you know. So George Harrison just famously said, "We'll bury it in the mix. We'll bury it in the mix." And I could just
one more
see,
time,
like, we'll bury it.
We'll bury it in the mix.
And so I could see like Eric Idle or one of the, you know, we'll bury it in the mix.
Very,
you know, like
very,
just,
yeah,
like,
very British, British humor,
very British. Yeah.
And then from there, George Harrison came up with the idea for a group called the Trembling Wilburys.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Lynne said, let's make it the Traveling Wilburys instead. And that
Which I thought was interesting, because Jeff Lynne is the engineer producer. So you would think that he would be all over, like, you know, trembling or mixing with the knob, playing with the knobs and all that. So you know, you would think that would be his idea. But yeah, that's cool.
Kind of,
yep.
Kind of contributed that much to it. But there's a lot to cover here. There is so much to cover. Yeah. And you would think for a group that made 2 albums, but there's the story of how they came together, which is one thing. I think at this point in this episode, we need to talk about Jeff Lynne from 87 to 92. Okay. Oh, yeah. So I've got a lot of statistics about that too. Yeah. This is going to be a Homer episode. We're letting you know now. We will keep it realistic, but everybody kind of needs, we really want everybody to understand his impact in this time era. And this was kind of his renaissance or reconstructing himself in a weird way. So it all starts with George Harrison, right? Where, like Eric said, that, you know, George Harrison wanted to record a solo album, looking for a producer. The tale is Dave Edmunds was considered or didn't have the time, or said, hey, reach out to Jeff Lynne. George Harrison was aware of Jeff Lynne through ELO, and they were known as like a Beatles knockoff and, you know, that kind of thing. George Harrison, just as a person, before he was going to work with somebody in this depth, like, he needed to really get familiar with them. So they actually just hung out. They went to, you know, at the time, George Harrison was into like the auto racing. So he took Jeff Lynne to like the auto racing, and they just really kind of spent time getting to know each other, and they got on fabulous. They became like really good friends. Yeah. Like kind of, probably something that George Harrison was missing in his kind of cynical musical life. He became very cynical and very, after the Beatle experience, right? He was just very, you know,
deeply spiritual.
Cynical is the only word, right? It's kind of like
deeply spiritual.
Jaded.
He was a man of all seasons. Let's put it that way. I think. Going back further, I mean, just, you know, some of his solo work, I think. Ever since All Things Must Pass, I mean, I think the albums after that were pretty much soup to nuts in that sense. Yeah. I mean, I think it was the Dark Horse tour that he really tore his voice up, and that's what caused him to like develop really, really bad stage fright. Yeah. So he didn't want to tour anymore. So he just would make an album that he just wanted to make, and and as a result, these albums were some of them were pretty good, some of them not so good. But Jeff Lynne comes along and he really shook things up. I think, you know, he really, you know, it was what was needed to really bring George back into the fold or the spotlight, as it were. Yeah, I think his one of the things was at the time is like he felt comfortable with him because he knew that he was a Beatles fan, but trusted that he wasn't going to try and make a Beatles record. Although they did have an homage to that on when Cloud
he was Fab on Cloud 9, but generally, just like George Harrison has that cynicism about the music business. Like, he's kind of cynical and a little jaded and kind of, I think, you know, working with Jeff kind of loosened him up a little bit and kind of, okay, you know, so Cloud 9 comes out and it's a big success, and they're going to release a single. And back in the day, they kind of would say, we want like a non-album track for like the back of the 45 or the cassette single, whatever it is. Yeah. Work something up, let's go. So, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, and Roy Orbison, because Jeff Lynne was working with Roy Orbison at the time. They go to dinner and George is like, hey, I need to record something tomorrow. Can you come help me out? And Jeff's like, sure. And then Roy's like, can I come too? So it's kind of like, Sure, Roy Orbison, you want to come? Who's going to say no?
Yeah, right? Yep.
So they get together. George Harrison needs a studio in L.A. He doesn't really. This is short notice. He calls Bob Dylan, who happens to be home, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, you can use my studio." He's like, "Okay, we got that." And then George Harrison needs one of his guitars, where for some reason one of his guitars is at Tom Petty's house. So he goes to Tom Petty. I need my guitar. I'm going to be doing something. Tom Petty, can I come by and hang out? Sure, why not? Yeah. So all these people convene at Dylan's house. Bob Dylan was not intending to. He was the barbecue master. Like he was doing a cookout. He's like, I'm hosting. You guys can record. I'll cook for you guys, and you can like barbecue.
Yeah.
He ended up getting involved, right? So they come up with this. They come up with this one-off song called "Handle with Care." They knock it out. George Harrison presents it to Warner Brothers, and they're like, no.
This cannot be a B-side.
Yeah,
no.
It's too good.
It's way, too prestigious. You got all these guys on it. There's no way this could be a B-side.
Can't do it. Yeah. Where, that's not because it sucked, because it was too good. They're like, no, like, what are you kidding me?
Just the thought of that though. George Harrison just didn't
submits this as a lark.
He didn't see it as such, right? He didn't. This was just a bunch of buddies like getting together and knocking this out. And I'm not going to say that Handle with Care is the greatest thing that any of them ever did like separately, obviously. I mean, but it's certainly a really great track. And to have all of these guys together to do that, and for the record executives to say, you not only have a great song here, you got an album here.
Yeah, you've got something else.
That's right.
So then George Harrison goes back and says, okay, are you guys interested in doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Dylan didn't have a lot of time. He does what's called his endless tour. Mm-hmm. I think it's still called the endless tour. I think from when he started, I think that's what the tour it's called, because that's all he does is tour. So he only had a certain amount of time, like, let's do this. So they get with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. He's got a studio in his house in Los Angeles. So they book that. The goal was to write a song a day. Right? It's like, we'll write a song in the morning, we'll record the vocals, kind of review it at night. Tomorrow, the next day, we're going to go in, we do another one. And when you've got 5 songwriters sitting around in a circle, I think you can get it done.
Absolutely. I think so.
If it was one person saying, I'm going to challenge myself, that might be a challenge. But when you've got 5 experts that all have different styles, you're going to get something out of it.
I think anybody would have gave their right arm. Any musician would have gave their right arm to be a fly on the wall, just to hang out and just watch those sessions happen. Just them sitting around playing acoustic guitars in a circle. God, I can't imagine how that must have felt. What it looked like, what it sounded like.
Yeah.
That's while they're all like having like their significant others are cooking pizza and
they're sitting in a circle in a kitchen. There's certain
exactly.
Everybody's got 5 acoustic guitars and just in a circle, throwing out a line, just throwing out a random line. Or they were actually looking through magazines, thumbing through magazines for interesting quotes or interesting sayings,
just nonsensical words, just to throw in
as a spark,
as a spark. Or and it was all in fun. That's the spontaneity, the just putting this together, stitching it together, and not taking it too seriously. We're not, we're not trying to like make the best thing here. We're just doing this as a lark. It's tongue in cheek. That's what it felt like, at least to me. But it's great stuff. I just love it. Love the spontaneity of it.
Yeah. It was just supposed to be easy breezy. And that was the thing is, George Harrison, kind of said to Bob Dylan, listen, we know that you're Bob Dylan, and George Harrison's good friends with him, but he's kind of like, we're going to treat you and talk to you like anybody else. It's kind of, that's the way it's going to be. And Bob Dylan's like, I feel the same way, like I'm in awe of you guys as well. So it's kind of, there was that mutual admiration society. Then once they got through that, cause Petty had worked with Dylan recently on, the Heartbreakers were the backing band for Dylan on a tour. So there was all these intertwining connections, like I said, Jeff Lynne was working on Roy Orbison's album, but had already worked with George Harrison. So there's all these kind of cross wiring of. Well,
Tom Petty worked with Dave Stewart too. I mean, right? I mean, that's the studio that they were using. There was
Don't Come Around Here No More.
That connection right there for Southern accent. So in a way that was the studio was almost another member,
Yeah.
because it has that connection, that
Yeah, and
connective
it was
thread.
very, very easy, breezy, loose recording. They would just record vocals and acoustic guitars, and that would be the framework, and they would just kind of get all that done.
Yeah.
And then once the recordings were done, Jeff Lynne and George Harrison, scuttled them off to England, where they would actually create the tracks, lay down all the backing stuff, and kind of make them the backing music for all this stuff behind all these great sessions that came out of, spontaneous. There's a lot of great footage. There's a documentary on YouTube you can watch where someone had, I think George Harrison, somebody had a video camera during the sessions.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see the creation of this, and you can see Dylan like in the studio reading his lyrics off while and singing them and making a change. And, it was that quick where they were just kind of really pushing each other creatively, but in a fun way. Not like, oh, there's this pressure. Like we're going to make a super group like Asia or The Firm. Like we're going to, they didn't announce anything. And if you look at the record album, none of their names are on it. There's not, you do not see any of the names of them, of these artists on it, so it's kind of that kind of low key of, that we're not trying to make a big statement. It's just like, here, we kind of knocked this out. We had a great time doing it. Enjoy.
Yeah. And when you think of the egos involved, right, especially Dylan, who is notoriously has a reputation of being difficult to work with. He does what he wants. He wants this. Next day he comes in, I want to do it this way. We're going to, we're completely scrapping this. I want whatever. Anybody who's ever produced him will probably tell you that. But here, no, he checked his ego at the door. And it was understood that this was just, I guess he was in the right frame of mind, or maybe he was in a good mood.
It's at his most playful. On this album in Volume 3, his tongue is firmly planted in his cheek in a good way, because when you've got somebody who can write really great lyrics, imagine what they do with it when they kind of just relax it and aren't not trying to make a serious statement, which Dylan got away from. He kind of and Dylan was in a little bit of a valley in his career at this point. Wasn't really on the top of the world. So this might have been a decision. This might have been a career decision of, let me do this and see what happens. It can't be any worse than anything else he's ever done.
I'm working with some great people here, and I'm glad he actually acknowledged that, Yeah. Because again, that's something that he, I don't know. He's very fickle. He's very, trying to get any kind of praise out of the guy. Like he's just an enigma.
Yeah. So when you look at the makeup of the group, it's like, okay, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, and Bob Dylan. Yeah. He's a superstar, but like Dylan's never been in a group before, never associated himself really with anything like that. Roy Orbison as well, but Dylan is enigmatic as a man on the stage by himself with a guitar and a harmonica, or
that's right.
Kind of that's the image that he cut. And so for him to join a group, and a group such as that, and maybe that's what attracted to him, that it wasn't a serious thing. It wasn't like, oh, we're getting Bob Dylan in our group, and we've got to impress him, and we've got to do this. All these guys were on equal footing.
It's interesting to know that both Dylan and Orbison were not. Orbison was very much in the same vein, where he wasn't a part of a group, basically a solo act most of his career, but yet the other members were all part of groups, Tom Petty and the Heartbreak, you had ELO, you had, these were bands, these were big bands, and the Beatles were, of course, that goes without saying. But so I thought it was that the two stars, so to speak, the ones that they brought in, that I think Jeff Lynne wanted Roy, and George wanted Bob Dylan to come in, and it's like, and they gave them, well, I can't really say equal footing, because I think that Dylan really, he has a lot of presence on this record. They gave him a lot to do. Roy Orbison, I feel like he was undervalued a little bit. I think they could have used it, because they're all like, you got the best voice, you have, it's amazing, you're still in fine form. And I feel like there's like one song that he sang lead on, and just a couple others that he just did a little bit of chorus on. And I felt that there could have been more there. Well,
I think it was a nice introduction for people, of that era that didn't know who Roy Orbison was, right? Because that's right, like Roy Orbison is like our parents' music, right? So but that was Jeff Lynne's hero. Like that was it's kind of a thing that his three heroes are Roy Orbison, Del Shannon, and the Beatles. So for him to get him in, I think this was enough to set him up for his solo album that he was working on, right? Because he was working, he was already had the machinations in motion to get a solo album going. He was working with Jeff Lynne, he was working with Bono, he's working with a couple of other artists and guest producers and stuff, assembling that. So I think this was a nice like entree of you know this guy's voice, you know him for Pretty Woman, and now you're going to hear kind of him doing some more popular stuff. And it set up Mystery Girl with You Got It. That hit came out after that. Unfortunately, he passed away like right after it. He never even got really to get a really big taste of what the Wilburys were going to become. Unfortunately, it was kind of like right out of the gate. He passed away very young in his 50s, believe it or not, at the time, and heart attack, and it left a gap in the band. And funny, the rumors were at the time, we're going to get, Roger McGuinn to replace him maybe. And then the other one was Del Shannon. I think that, and everyone shot that down, but I think the Del Shannon rumor has some credence to it because Jeff Lynne was producing Del Shannon's album at the time. And the Traveling Wilburys did a cover of Runaway.
Yes,
as one of their bonus tracks.
Yep.
That's a little too coincidental. Right. I mean, and like I said, and Del Shannon was one of Jeff Lynne's heroes as well. So it's kind of, and Del Shannon worked with Tom Petty in the past also. Tom Petty had produced some of his stuff earlier, and then they both worked on his Rock On album, which unfortunately Del Shannon would pass away. He took his own life in 1990. And then, Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty would finish up Rock On in 1991 and release that. So, I think there if there was going to be a substitute, it would have been Del Shannon. I think so. And the fact that Tom Petty was also a huge fan, there was something that him and Jeff Lynne had in common. Yeah.
When he was asking Jeff to produce, start producing Full Moon Fever, that was a thing as well. And I think during the sessions for the Wilbury record, I think I just read that Tom played Free Fallin' for the first time for the entire group, and they kept asking him to do it again and again and again, and I thought that was interesting because I didn't think that happened till after, but the song was already in the works. It was already in the works. Yeah. So
I think this is a good time to probably stop and talk about, because we're talking about, Del Shannon, we're talking about all these other things. I think we need to put a little chronology in here just so you can understand where Jeff Lynne was or how expansive his reach was at this point.
That's right.
And I'm going to roll through a bunch of, years and artists, but I think it really encapsulates what was going on here and how all of a sudden this guy he went from like a pariah in ELO of like, oh my God, that is so schmaltzy and whatever, to all of a sudden everybody wanting to work. He became like the Phil Collins of producers. Like everybody was asking him to do work.
That's right.
So we'll pick it up here. So Cloud 9 came out in November of 1987. Jeff Lynne produced. Jeff Lynne would work on Brian Wilson's solo album, which would come out in 1988. He produced a track there.
Yeah.
Land of Dreams from Randy Newman comes out in September of 88, and he produced a couple songs on there. Mystery Girl comes out in Traveling Wilburys comes out in October of 88. So right after Land of Dreams, Traveling Wilburys proper comes out. Roy Orbison's album Mystery Girl comes out in February of 89. He produced 3 tracks. Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever comes out in April of 89, which he produced the whole thing and co-wrote all the songs, or almost all the songs, right?
Practically,
Smash it. He releases his own solo album, Armchair Theater, in July of 1990, which absolutely did nothing. All these other ones, and that goes to show, it kind of makes a point. Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 comes out in October of 1990, which he produced. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Into the Great Wide Open, comes out in July of 91, which he produced. Del Shannon's, post death album Rock On comes out in October of 1991, totally produced by him and Tom Petty, and they co-wrote a lot of songs. The Joe Cocker album Night Calls, Jeff Lynne would work on that. That came out in October of 91 as well. And then finally, he would work with another Beatle, Ringo Starr, on his album Time Takes Time in May of 1992. if you zoned out through that whole list, I don't blame you because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show the reach that he had at this point. This was like a renaissance for him and a change in his style because he was known for like this, the electronic ELO sound and the processing. Yeah. Traveling Wilburys is not that. It's very acoustic, very wooden, very, I don't want to say not hillbilly, but very kind of that type of country-ish a little bit, really going back to some of the more analog
a little bit
instruments.
Of folk. Yeah, a little bit of folk, a little bit of rock and roll, I guess. Just old time
skiffle involved, inspired, which was a British kind of form of. Well, I don't know what it was a form.
Let me ask you this: so ever since Wilbury, okay, because George Harris, Cloud 9 still had that somewhat electronic sound to it. There was a sheen to it. There were, he did employ a lot, he had some really great guest stars on the record, but overall it still had that, he was still using a lot of keyboards, a lot of sequencers, that kind of thing. And yes, the Wilburys would change that home. Now, that being said, all of these albums that came after, extension of the Wilbury sound, you think, or what? Do you think it all sound, if you were to put a lot of these songs together, like You Got It, and, I Won't Back Down, Zombie Zoo, Built to Last, Into the Great Wide Open even, Cheer Down, George Harrison song from Lethal Weapon 2. Would you say that this could be Traveling Wilburys? I mean, because it's really pretty, it sounds very, very similar to.
I think maybe the aesthetic was influenced and trickled through. I'm not going to say that Full Moon Fever sounded like a Traveling Wilburys album because it didn't. It was very much different than Tom Petty and different than.
You don't think like You're So Bad sounds like doesn't sound like a little bit,
song? But I think it was more produced. Okay. I think it fits. You can hear the inspiration, but I don't think each one of these albums is different enough that it's got the same pedigree, but it doesn't sound like a Tom Petty Wilbury album. Jeff Lynne's solo album certainly doesn't sound like a Wilburys album as well. So I think that the influence is there where the techniques, or maybe because they recorded everything originally acoustically, because that was, everyone just sitting around with the guitar. So those were the main tracks that they laid down, was acoustic. So maybe from there it was kind of like, okay, well, here's the building blocks.
And then he came in and put his flair on it.
Put his flair on it, which you can hear. If you're an ELO fan, you can hear. Well, I remember when I listened to this album when it first came out, I'm like, that's it. There's that. Yeah. This sounds like Jungle from Out of the Blue on Margarita.
Yeah.
Like I was like picking through it. I'm like, he you know that he produced it.
Most definitely. And I guess that's where I'm getting at is that it has that all the stuff has that extremely recognizable Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, his fingerprints. If this was a murder scene, his fingerprints were everywhere.
Remember, like we would always comment on the drummers, the various drummers that he had on various albums, and yet you wouldn't be able to tell who was playing because of the way he mic'd the drums. And
he would gate that snare really.
And it all sounded the same. So if it was Stan Lynch, if it was Jim Keltner. I don't remember the name of the drummer on his solo record. I think it was
Met Matheson. She was from can't remember the group she was from, but her drumming was incredible on his album.
But it sounded the same, right? I mean, it's and then Jeff Lynne himself would pick up the sticks but it would still sound the same, Yeah. So it's incredible how he was able to achieve that. Ringo Starr too, same thing.
Yeah, just so to the Wilburys, we've got a selection of songs. The album is short. It's like 35 minutes. You get in and you get out, which is great though.
Breeze right through it. Yeah.
Infinitely listenable. It's kind of like, it is really the benefit of having 5 songwriters is you get really 5 different points of view. And sometimes those are mashed together in one song.
Yeah.
And like you had said, the great thing about it is it's not just, Bob Dylan is singing this whole song. This is Tom Petty's turn. You get some of the other Wilburys coming in for verses or bridges, kind of dancing in and out of songs. So there'll be one guy that's got the lead, but then Roy Orbison will come in, on Last Night and kind of sing some of the bridge stuff, and then kind of peek out again. you know, and then, you know, George
Rattled,
Harrison
he
will
does
come in
that,
for something.
you know, his classic. I remember
Rattle.
the first time we heard that, we were dying. We was just,
I was like, what the
that's so
hell was
great.
that? Like, what the hell was that? One of his like Pretty Woman, like,
Yeah. It was
but
so
that's so
good
great.
though.
Like
Yeah.
that's the great thing is there's so much to enjoy and kind of pick up on, and they're not making fun of the audience. They're just having fun making the music. Like this is five artists enjoying each other's company, and you know, not having necessarily a goof, but you know, they're kind of like, let's knock this out. Let's see how fast we can do it. Everybody contribute. Let's get in, and that way you could tell it's there. It's like it's on the wax.
Yeah,
it is literally there. And again, even Dylan with some of his, you know, if you let me drive your pickup truck and park it where the sun don't shine. I mean, that's
my
kind of,
God.
you know,
That
it's
song is so inappropriate, but it's
word,
like,
you know,
but it's one of the most catchiest songs on the record. It's one of my favorites.
And you gotta laugh because you if you know where it's like you see where it's coming, you got to take it from where it's coming from, right? That's what people used to say, like make a joke. Well, take it from where it's coming from,
right?
That you have to on this, right? You know, it's meant to be that tongue in cheek, but not pandering to the audience. That's what it is. They're not pandering. They're just having fun with it and saying we're gonna do some fun stuff and not, you know, take it too seriously and see what comes out of it. And you just get a breezy, infinitely listenable album.
I think it's George is as Tom Petty would say, he was the ringleader. I think most definitely it was George Harrison that kept that spirit alive, because he had such a great sense of humor about this kind of thing. And, you know, because he like we talked about before, he was so multifaceted. He had his hands in everything: movie making, race car driving. He was into gardening. He was into this. He was spiritual. It's just an amazing guy. And I think that really, that aura just kind of rubbed off on everybody else, including Dylan. You know, I think in standing in George Harrison's presence, I think it humbled Dylan to a degree. I think, it's just because.
Yeah, and he was definitely
that's why he's my favorite Beatle, you know, because he doesn't necessarily have all the best songs, but but because of that, because he seemed like the most approachable, the guy that you want to sit down and chat with. You know, he wasn't always talking about being a Beatle. He was just he cared more about other things, and it was
about being a person.
Such an amazing personality.
Definitely the glue of the group, and definitely the driving force behind it. But it's not the George Harrison project. He was the guiding light and the glue, but took a significant backseat. I mean, especially when we got to Volume 3, he was kind of less apparent in that aspect of it, but still a driving force nevertheless. And that's the great thing, is you get kind of equal shares of everybody. So if you're not if you happen to not be a big Dylan fan, which I wasn't at the time when this came out, I was not a big Dylan fan.
I remember.
So I was kind of like, I was like, Jesus, like, oh man, like another one. I was like, this guy's got another song on here. Like, how come Jeff Lynne doesn't have, like,
that's fine. That's the second album, right? We're talking about. I mean, but
this one too.
But even the first one, he does a lot. There's Tweeter and the Monkey Man. There's Margarita.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yeah. That's pretty much with Tom Petty. But and Tweeter and the Monkey Man. That's
all him.
It's all him, and it's long.
Yeah, that's his absolute homage to Bruce Springsteen's style of songwriting. Yeah, it takes place in Jersey. There's mentions of Thunder Road, which is a Springsteen song. So there's a wink and a nod to someone that Springsteen was inspired by Dylan. So it's a little wink and a nod back to him, which was kind of neat. Again, just kind of not in a crass way or an insulting way, just having fun with this material.
Rolling Stone put out a special issue about all of Bob. I love that issue because it was all about Bob Dylan's albums through the years, and they had different articles and periodicals, and he actually made a handmade list of songs that were not popular, like sort of like deep cuts or whatever. And Tweeter and the Monkey Man was one of those songs, which I was so glad to see, because he acknowledged the Wilburys,
because you don't really see him talk about it. You don't really see him talk about it. And he's the only artist that Jeff Lynne did not work with, right? When we went through that list, all the other Wilburys and were on there. And noticeably absent was Dylan. I could not find any. I could not find any articles or anything that they had an adversarial relationship, but it just seemed like Dylan was like, okay, this, I'll do this. This is what I'll do. But
it was what it was. He just moved on to the very next thing. And
went on to his next thing.
That's
Dylan.
But
you would have thought it's like, okay, he worked with everybody else and their mother, but not Dylan. It was kind of like a noticeably.
I wonder though if Bob Dylan ever thought about, having Jeff Lynne produce anything for him. I don't know.
He might not have wanted that overly for his solo stuff. He's definitely a little bit more bare bones and kind of. I'm sure he doesn't record the way Jeff Lynne records with all the overdubbing and all that kind of stuff. So that could, as Ben Montench and others have complained about the way he does it, but that's how he does it. Yeah. That's, there's that's his secret sauce. But, God, I was listening to this. I've been listening to this, throughout the week, but I'm telling you, I when I listened to Heading for the Light yesterday, I got tingles. I literally got tingles listening to that song. It's probably my favorite song on this album because of the vocal interplay. George Harrison sounds like he's having a blast. First of all, this is one of his best vocal performances, George Harrison. He really sounds invigorated.
Yeah.
And just kind of like really
I always loved it. Yeah.
And then Jeff Lynne comes in the chorus, like up top, really high.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I get shivers. The hairs on the back of my neck.
When they sing together, it sounds great. It's like the Beatles. Like, it's like, you could swear that it could be the Beatles, and they would do that. He does when they did Runaway, they sang together and they say the harmonies on that, I think, are incredible. And Jeff takes the lead on that song, but I didn't even know they did it until they re-released the album much later on. I had no idea that they actually cut that track. And that
you could hear Jeff Lynne like all the way on the top there. During those choruses, I'm like, oh my God, this is musical heaven. It's just great listening to a well-produced song, a really great lead vocal where, again, George Harrison seemed to have like invigorated him and kind of brought him back. I mean, he was literally on cloud nine with his album, because that was a comeback album for him, right? Everyone was like, he was kind of like back. And then this kind of like, oh, now I'm in a group with people I feel comfortable with. There's no egos, there's no fighting, there's no backbiting, and it just seemed like he was kind of in his element, and you really can hear it on this album and on volume 3 as well. It's kind of like, so you can't help but root for these guys. All of them kind of coming together with such a then you have something like Congratulations, which is like this slow kind of like loping song, but all of it is just kind of it fits. It's just like one of those things. None of the songs have a common theme or feel, but that's the Traveling Wilburys.
But I think that Congratulate might sound for me the most Dylan of the songs. Even like Tweeter and the Monkey Man has that Wilburys flair. It has like when they with the chorus, when they're all singing that, it's like when the walls came, like the little keyboard. And so it doesn't really, but of course the phrasing and, the lyrics for the most part are Dylan, but then when they come in, but Congratulations to me is just a straight up Dylan type song, and I dig it. I dig Margarita too. And I just love that little Tom Petty comes in at the very end, just sings that one line at the very end. And that's just everything.
She wrote a long letter on a short piece of paper.
On a short piece of paper. What a,
the song just ended, like, it's just kind of like, again, it's that clever stuff that they just kind of throw in.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, and on its own, it doesn't mean anything. And it doesn't really have too much probably to do with the song.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like
it's just cool.
It's kind of a word salad, like kind of just these ideas that they're throwing together and then stitching a song out of it, out of these different people throwing lines out. And that's one of the great things about the documentary is you see that when they're going through the lyrics for Dirty World, because at the end, it's like kind of a round robin of just phrases where everybody takes a turn.
Again, that's great too.
And the video is during the video, they're just kind of throwing stuff out and someone's writing it down and kind of capturing all the ideas.
Laughing, they're having a grand old time.
And then they'll kind of figure it out.
Roy Orbison says, he goes, why does it always come to me? And it's always
Trembling Wilbury.
The Trembling Wilbury. Like, I'm always the one that gets that line. Like, what's up with that? And they're all laughing. And they do it, and it happens. And you see Jeff Lynne just crack up. and he's just hysterical laughing.
And to see these guys in the studio around a microphone singing, like in someone's garage studio, so it's not like this slick,
much like a Beach Boys session or something, right? Like someone from Pet Sounds, but it's like, but here you have every face in this band is somebody great, big,
and they're all around a microphone singing together. They're all like holding the sheet, holding the lyrics and kind of waiting for their turn. Just kind of
saw the video for Handle with Care. That to me was one of the such glee. It was so badass to see them all standing there, and George Harrison has the long duster coat on, and just Jeff kind of wearing the vest with the white shirt, and like it's just that was cool stuff. We were totally into that. We were totally into what they were wearing. We were such geeks for these guys.
Because it was great to see it like that. It was a real thing. Like it wasn't just going to be an album. There was going to be videos that they did together, which is real. Because again, Dylan was kind of in and out with that. So the fact that they got him for that, and then they made a video. They made a video for End of the Line, which unfortunately was made after Roy Orbison passed. So it's a very bittersweet way to close out the album. Oddly enough, too, because of his passing.
Yeah.
It kind of closes it out that way too, on a little bit of a melancholy note. It's a great song.
His guitar on the rocking chair.
Yeah, in the video, they kind of pay homage to him. They have got a picture of him up, and when his line comes up, the train goes dark, like they're going through like a tunnel.
Yeah,
and they show his guitar in the rocking chair. Really, like classy. Handled it with class. They didn't have to. They could have done something goofy or whatever, but it's just like respect for the man.
Yeah, I agree. Some people might find it, that's a little cheesy or whatever, but I thought it was great. It was really very nice tribute.
You got them
very
all
thoughtful.
in that, all in that room, kind of again strumming the guitars, playing the Dan Electro guitars. There's 2 Dan Electros. If you're a guitar person, there's 2 Dan Electros in that video. Tom Petty's playing a Dan Electro bass. Yeah. And Jeff Lynne is playing a Dan Electro guitar, but we'll leave the guitar geekery for another time. So this would go on to win a Grammy Award again. It was like the wellspring. You saw Mystery Girl come out, you saw Full Moon Fever come out of this. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden it was. I'm not saying it was all Jeff Lynne, but you just saw all this creativity all of a sudden come out, and like Full Moon Fever was probably the biggest thing that came out of this.
Yeah,
I dare say was like. Positioned like right around that time, Mystery Girl comes out, which was Roy Orbison's, it came out while he was alive, but he passed right after. But Full Moon Fever just kind of was like the launch, it was like waiting on the launching pad.
Yeah,
and all that stuff was peaking, and then Free Fallin' comes out, and I Won't Back Down, and you're seeing George Harrison and Jeff Lynne in the video for him, and it's kind of like
and Ringo.
And visually, it's an extension of the Wilburys, right? Maybe not sonically, but visually, when you look at the
spirit is there.
Yeah, I Won't Back Down video. You see them in there. You're like, oh, the Wilburys. Those guys are the Wilburys.
Won't Back Down wasn't that like that? That was like that came later, right? I mean, he recorded most of the songs, and then I Won't Back Down was like a late entry when it wasn't not on that record.
Well, I mean, the album came out in '89, so all this was done. As far as
because I know George Harrison sings on it as well, so there's that. Tom Petty co-wrote Cheer Down, but I don't think he plays on it, but I think he co-wrote it with George and Jeff Lynne. So that there's
Jeff Lynne
that.
produced it.
Yeah. So
there's
the spirit is
So just all that. It was like a community of artists that all of a sudden kind of found themselves in each other's company, and then kind of created this little club where they would just kind of work on each other's albums and kind of guest. And if you're, and it's got to be kind of great to feel like that, to feel like, oh yeah, I'm part, like I'm not just Tom Petty in the Heartbreakers. And that was always the thing I think he struggled with was, what am I besides Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers?
Yeah.
And he was able to literally join another group and then have a solo career after that too, and kind of define on his own terms what he wanted to do and what he wanted his career to do. We never got to see what happened with Roy Orbison, unfortunately.
Yeah.
George Harrison would, the Wilburys would release volume 3 of which would be their second album without obviously Roy Orbison. George Harrison started working on another solo album around the time of his passing, which would be called Brainwashed. He didn't get to finish it, but he left extensive notes for his son Danny literally they had a playbook of what he was working on and what the intent was. So Danny Harrison called Jeff Lynne and said, can you help me with this and finish this off? Unfortunately, Jeff Lynne is also a person that ends up losing a lot of his heroes and then having to finish or ends up finishing work for them. He did it with Del Shannon, Roy Orbison to an extent because he worked on some stuff after as well.
Yep.
And then George Harrison as well. And then, you get the concert for George, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers come out and they do Taxman. They do run through a couple of George numbers, and Jeff Lynne was on stage all night, and then they do Handle with Care.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, when Jeff sang Roy Orbison's part, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't even know what I don't even think I looked when I watched the concert. I didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
But when he uncorked on Roy Orbison's part, oh my God, he absolutely, you could see why he was a fan of his, because he was able to handle it. He didn't sound like Roy Orbison, but he was able to get his voice to soar the same way that Roy Orbison's voice he soars above. Yeah, he was able to kind of do justice to the master. Like the Padawan was able to honor the master in this case. And Jeff Lynne has covered Roy Orbison songs in the past.
Well, when he put out Long Wave, which was his recording of some of his favorite songs pre rock and roll era, and he Running Scared, he does. It's an amazing version. I love it.
He just he pounds it. And
I want to point out too is like George Harrison. I think we talked about. You and I always thought, well, they're a group now, I guess, because they came out with a second album.
Yeah, that cemented it.
And so we because I thought when the first one, it was like it's just a thing. It's just a one-time thing. Yeah. But I guess they started really taking it seriously, and George they were even talking about touring.
Yeah,
right.
Everybody wanted to, but George was reluctant, and
George was scared.
Yeah, and they had these weird Beatle ideas. We talked about it like in the Get Back documentary. The Beatles were going to go like play it in some foreign country in a coliseum and go on a ship. George, the stuff they talked about was going on a train and performing on a train as it passed through, like all this weird kind of stuff.
One-off, like carnival, almost carny kind of like lifestyle, like the old minstrels back in the day,
traveling through towns and kind of doing it
right.
And then they actually talked about, well, what would a concert look like? Would we do Wilbury songs? Then would everybody do their own stuff?
Yeah.
That would have been a ticket to die for.
Of course.
That would have been a ticket to absolutely die for or kill for, depending on what side of the ticket you're on.
I think ultimately it was George's stage fright that
they couldn't pull it together.
But it was Eric Clapton that got him over that, because they toured
Japan, right?
Japan in like 92, I believe.
Yeah.
And Eric was like, you got me, you got my band. Let's go. He was always pushing George, but ever since that disastrous Dark Horse tour, George was, but he actually got him to do it. And it's unfortunate that he, didn't continue that. I would have loved to have seen him, tour with Jeff Lynne.
What did Clapton say? I stole your wife. This is the least I could do.
Which George was like, yeah, you can have her.
I stole your wife. Here's my band. I don't know.
But it's funny because most of the songs, if you look at that set list because I obviously bought that album when it came out on CD and they released it, and Jeff Lynne actually did the mixing on it.
Yeah.
So there was still that connection was still there. His the presence.
Yeah, they were best buds. They were best buds till the end.
But the playlist was actually very similar to the concert for George.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it wasn't really much of a head scratcher for Eric Clapton to say, we're just going to do that in the spirit of concert for Bangladesh and this. And when we toured in Japan, bringing back all the people that was on that tour, that's what, that got me,
that was a who's who on the stage for concert
together with Jeff Lynne, with all his buddies. It's amazing stuff.
It was bittersweet.
Yeah.
Wilburys would release Volume 3, which would be their second album. They did that to kind of mess with everybody, because normally you'd be looking for Volume 2.
Yeah.
But since there was no Roy Orbison, they skipped Volume 2 and went to Volume 3. They got everybody back. The lineup was a little different, though. This time you've got Spike Wilbury, Clayton Wilbury, Muddy Wilbury, and Boo Wilbury.
Yeah.
And George Harrison is Spike. Jeff Lynne is Clayton. Tom Petty is Muddy. And of course, Bob Dylan has to be Boo.
Boo. Yeah.
Boo Wilbury. Volume 3 took on right from the opening track. It's decidedly a harder edge to it. With the opening track, She's My Baby, absolutely kind of is making a little bit of a different statement. Gary Moore does the uncredited solo on that guitar solo.
This was odd.
Shredding. I'm like, I was like, who? I don't know who's playing.
I remember you didn't like that when you first heard the song. You were like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not what we expected. It's just like, and to hear George Harrison sing lyrics like, she's got a body for sin, and it's just so unlike him to be singing that kind of
and
stuff.
Bob Dylan, she likes to stick her tongue right down my throat. Again, they just go with like these they're not afraid to kind of go there with like a wink and a nod of we're not taking this seriously. It's not, but and then this album, Bob Dylan was only available for a very short amount of time again. So what George Harrison did this time is he just had Dylan record lead vocals for every song. He said, just sing every song and we'll figure it out later, just so we have it down. And then during the production, George Harrison was like, he was just kind of like not really like in the mood to kind of change it out. So this album is very Dylan. It seems more Dylan heavy. Yeah. And again, at the time, I'm like, oh.
I don't like it. It's too much Dylan.
if I said Jesus on the first album, I said Jesus Christ on the second album. Like he's here even more.
He's like, I don't like it. It's too much Dylan. Too much Dylan.
But of course, as we grow and as we evolve and develop our musical taste, I grew to love and really appreciate all of his contributions. At the time, I was not. I'm like, God, because I just wanted to hear Jeff Lynne. Honestly, I'm like,
of course,
if he's the producer, he's probably going to be like, he should be more heard in my opinion. Again, I'm a homer, so I'm going to always.
My favorite song, and this stems from when we saw Dylan a few years back. And when he did all those, like he was doing those standards and he was doing this stuff, like, the dancing, like, New Blue Moon to me, like when I hear that song and when Dylan kicks in the chorus, like, like, and I could just see him like doing that stance and that just cracks me up every time it's my favorite track off of Volume 3. It is my favorite track because Jeff
he's got those yahoos in there at the end, right? Like the yoo-hoo.
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's like, it's kind of like, it's fun. And New Blue Moon is a great song because that's another Jeff and George kind of singing together the main stuff. And this album, Volume 3, definitely has it's got some of the Wilbury DNA, like Seven Deadly Sins and If You Belong to Me. You Took My Breath Away is another beautiful one. That's with Tom Petty and Jeff.
Yeah, that's a great one.
When Jeff comes in on the bridge for that one, I mean, you're really just getting like great. Like it's like the Avengers. It's like the Avengers making an album, right? It's like Marvel team up. It's like all these guys are swapping positions, singing lead, then singing a bridge, then singing a bridge, and singing lead. Yeah. Just doing, being team players, and not coming in and say, well, I got to have, 65% of the songs or I'm not doing it. It's like, no, you just, whatever's best for the music is
whatever feels right. Yeah. And if you're just really great fan of just listening to music, not trying to get anything out of it as far as political statements or anything like that. This is just, both these albums are just a fun listen in that sense. Yeah. And that's all it is. You appreciate what they're doing. You appreciate that they're together. You appreciate what the songs are catchy. They're fun. And that's it. And that's all you need. And it's just, it's such a light in an otherwise, like, Dylan would do a lot of like his political and, all that kind of stuff. And I think each of them did that at one point or another. They had their dark periods and this and that, but these two albums, no. I mean, this is just a lot of fun. And they
Inside Out's a great song. It's like another great, like everybody kind of sings together. The music video is just a lot of fun. They're all on a stage together, miming the song. And you get to see, again, you kind of get to see the interplay with all of them, just to see these four guys on the stage. It's just like, it's great to see that kind of stuff. And that they're open to not taking themselves so seriously. Usually music artists are like, I'm trying to make this statement and I got to get this point across.
That's
and,
right. It's
serious music. It's like, these guys have all made their serious music and now it's time to have just a little fun with your friends. And I think with Volume 3, they kind of, it's sleeker I think, because they understood the process. It's like, okay, well, we know how we did volume 1, so we're going to be able to do the same. But now that they know how they did it, they were able to probably be more economical, take a few more risks with the music because it wasn't such an unknown. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of a harder edge to some of the songs. As far as like even Wilbury Twist, which is kind of a goof.
Most definitely. I think George plays a lot more. There's more guitar.
Yeah.
On it. There's, you hear a lot of more of his slide.
Yeah, there's some mandolin on this too. Like in Devil's Been Busy. He's got a little mandolin or sitar. I'm sorry, sitar in that.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't just saying, okay, let's make another Handle with Care. Right. It's just more of a continuation of what they were doing, regrouping a few years later. And
I think
didn't sell as much, but still just like
we talked about Jumping the Shark last week. I think probably Wilbury Twist for me is like, that's the moment where it's like, okay, guys,
you think that was,
I
they gotta have their own song.
I'm not a fan. And then of course the video with John Candy and
everybody was, you know what? That was the popular thing. It was like, let's get all these celebrities in this video, like Cheech Marin and everybody trying to dance and whatever. Yeah. It was a goof. It was a way to close it out.
Goofy song. And it was like, okay,
you know what it is they didn't overstay their welcome. I think if there was more, then you risk starting to make conscious choices and being more self-aware. Yeah. This was enough of let's kind of get it back together again. Let's kind of do another one. And I think this is just enough. Like, again, it's like one of those things, like stop before it gets to be too much. And then you get to enjoy it as being perfect.
Well, one of the best things was that they didn't replace Roy Orbison. They just carried on without him. That was the perfect thing to do. I think, starting to bring in new members, and then it just would have been a totally different vibe. I think, and then of course, let's talk. Hey, there was some. Let's talk about some of the groups that stemmed from this, like the Notting Hillbillies, right? With Mark Knopfler. I think there was the Bunburys with the Bee Gees and Eric Clapton. They did like they cut 3 tracks. Yeah, it was because they were all part of the same cricket team. Again, very British, very So it was like, okay,
Clapton and the Bee Gees.
Clapton and the Bee Gees.
So what was it? What was the song? It was like I Shot the Knights on Broadway.
Well, because of Robert Stigwood. They both were managed by him. They knew each other back in the 70s. But it's odd. But the title.
There were some other super groups too that came out of this. There was one with like some members of REM and some other alternative groups. Like there was that whole thing of but again, then it became like a conscious decision of okay, let's do. We can do this. Like let's do it. Let's put something together. This wasn't thought like that. This was because George Harrison needed a guitar and needed a place to record a song.
Right.
That's how this happened. He didn't, there's some revisionist history of, we were talking about it and I want this, I want that. But in the end, it was because a guy needed a place to record and someone else had his guitar and he had dinner with a guy that was going to help him.
And that guy just happened to be a Beatle.
And he happened to know a lot of musical friends as well.
Yes, right.
But that's, if you take everything else out of it, that's what it was. It wasn't like Asia, right? Where we're going to put together this group and we want to do some pop stuff
and do a conscious, change and like the sound
all the top prog guys are coming together.
Oh my God.
In a thing, or the Firm is like, okay, this is a super group with Paul Rodgers and Jimmy Page. And, that became the flavor, Coverdale Page. Those all the things kind of became like flavors of the month.
Highwaymen, the country. You had Willie Nelson.
That's no joke. That's the real deal.
That's the real. Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash. I mean,
Waylon Jennings.
Yep, that was something to behold. Yep.
But when this was just a story or a fable or a fairy tale, if you will, or a myth about these Wilbury brothers that came together and released their music for all of us to hear. And it's just if you listen to all the other podcasts that we do, all this, it fits all into it. Yeah. But you can really kind of see like this is like a seed that was planted for this era. When we talk about the music of these other artists, Petty and all these other guys, you kind of see this is like the wellspring that was a fertile ground for inspiration, fertile ground for creativity and being with like-minded people where there's no clashing, no fighting. No, again, none of this, I want this, I want that. It was kind of like everybody was just there for the to contribute. They were all in awe of each other. So they were all just happy to be in the room looking at the other four.
That's right.
No matter who it was, Petty was looking at the other four in awe. Jeff Lynne is looking at the other four in awe. You know, you don't really get that. And they were all humble about it.
It's such a great, great story. And it doesn't happen very often, unfortunately, in music. Yeah. You know, when people of this caliber getting together, or even groups have been together for quite some time. The infighting, they just don't get along. You know, the Police rebanding, you know, they had a miserable time apparently in that world tour. I mean, it's a shame. It really is, you know.
Yeah, these were friendships that were, I think, you know, it was kind of like they were friends first.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't like guns for hire, like, oh, let's hire Tom Petty for this project. Let's hire Roy Orbison. It was like they wanted to come and hang out. It's kind of like, okay, come on and hang out, you know.
Yep.
And then they just start recording and start being creative, and you've got all these people and all the sparks that are flying. So
yep.
Yeah. And then as a final footnote, Beatles Anthology was at 95, 96, somewhere around there.
95, yeah.
The Beatles would reconvene, and they had a couple of tracks that they wanted to, you know, from the archives with John Lennon's vocals on it. They needed a producer to kind of make this work, and it was Jeff Lynne.
Mm-hmm.
The third person ever that would produce the Beatles.
Not George Martin. Yeah,
not George Martin. No,
I remember
it was a very technical process of what needed to get done.
Oh, I remember when I first heard the demo. I think it was way before. It was like, we're talking like 2-3 years.
Yeah, Free as a Bird was around as like a bootleg.
Free as a Bird. I heard it on NEW. Because I think it was Pat St. John, the DJ, played it for the first. He's like, "This is it, folks. This is the song. You know, the upcoming anthology that they're working on. It's painstaking, blah blah blah." And Jeff Lynne of VLO was produced. I was like, "Whoa," you know. It's like, I think I called you. I was like, "Did you know that Jeff Lynne was?" Of course you did, you know. But yeah. So, but yeah, it took that length of time to really. And when you heard that original demo, it was on a cassette, and it was so hissy, and it was so like. I was like, I don't know how they're going to do this.
Yeah, he had to do stuff with time codes, and there's some great information about that on YouTube that you can absolutely find about the making of that track, and how he, again, as a producer, you know, extraordinaire, he became very much in demand.
Quite the feather in his cap. He got to work with all his heroes, and to cap it off, working with the Beatles. That was, I can't imagine.
Yeah,
he could have retired right there and said, "I'm done." You
know,
he
worked with all three of his heroes. I mean, whoever gets to that, and a lot of times they say, "Be careful, you don't want to ever meet your heroes." And he said it was exactly what he said. It was the proudest moment. I think. Yeah, exactly what he wanted it to be. You know, so that's good on him. But this meeting of the Jeff Lynne Appreciation Society will come to a close. We will not, you know, of course, you know, I know it could get a little long-winded in the tooth of our appreciation for him, but it's only because he really doesn't get the due. He was the least known of the Wilburys. Honestly.
That is correct. That is absolutely. Who's the guy with the curly hair on the cover with the glasses?
With the glasses?
Who's that guy? Yeah.
But hopefully we've given you some of the backstory about how his contribution was the biggest, how he had the biggest. I feel he had the biggest impact. He shaped the sound of everything. You know, after the vocals were done, obviously George Harrison was there as well. But if you know anything about ELO or Jeff Lynne, his DNA is all over this. You could pick out, you know exactly that he was involved with this and masterminding all the great vocal work, putting supporting music underneath it and making it all work and sound like cohesive.
And never, ever taking the full credit. Never saying like, this was me. I did this. I did that. You know, like, no, he was very much very humble. Oh, you know, I'm sick to death that Roy Orbison died.
Yeah.
You know,
I was just happy to be in the room.
Right.
Like stuff like that.
And working with George Harrison. Oh my God. You know, but you know, there was, such a great, humble guy.
Yeah. A lot like me. That's why I like him so much. We have a lot in common. That humble.
Yeah. Well,
not.
No comment.
Maybe people are attracted to their opposite. Maybe that's why.
There you go. You know, you're the what is it? The bizarro Jeff Lynne.
There you go. I'm the multiverse. I'm the Lynn Jeff. of podcasting.
No,
Anyway,
I think you're a pretty nice guy, Dean. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So yeah, we've advocated for this. Both of these albums are available on Spotify and streaming services, so you can check it out. They also did put out a box set a few years ago. That box set is available for streaming too. There's a couple extra tracks there. Maxine, Like a Ship, the one about the children.
Nobody's Child,
and
Charity.
Runaway.
Yeah.
And Runaway.
Yep.
So there is some extra material there as well. So go check all that out. Let us know, did we go on too long about the Traveling Wilburys? Was it too much of a good thing? I don't think so. We think that there's no such thing as too much of a good thing. It fits in well.
Well, this is one of the albums that we just profess to. That's just what the podcast is all about. This was one of those records that we give you a gush
episode every so often, not all the time, right?
We as friends, this was what we were listening to in the day. I mean, of course, a lot of great music at the time, but we connected on this stuff and had just a ball with it. And I missed those days. This really brings us back, and not to get all sentimental and misty. I'm not going to cry.
I got hairs on the back of my neck. I didn't quite cry, but I absolutely listening to, and it's great when music can still do that to you. And that's right. why we do this show, is to talk about those types of experiences. And hopefully maybe this doesn't do it for you, but maybe there is other music that does it for you, and you're able to reconnect with that music as well and experience what that meant to you. This meant a lot to us. And we figured we would uncork this one. So we're done gushing. We're going to kind of calm down. We're going to go have some sedatives, maybe drink some NyQuil or something to put us to sleep.
There you go.
Go back into our little hobbit holes. But in the meantime, you can find us at 3324 Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, at 3324P on Twitter. We actually do live shows every other Wednesday. We haven't spoken about that in a while. We just had a blast at our last one. It was so much fun. We give away prizes as well. So if you're just looking for the mercenary aspect of it to get something, come to the live show. You might win, and you might have some fun as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of 3324 Podcast. For Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.